The vast Imperial ship hung motionless against the backdrop of stars. Admiral Lee stood with perfect posture on the command bridge, his uniform crisp and his expression stern. Around him, officers worked at their stations, their movements precise and efficient as they had been trained. "Status report," Lee demanded. "The unknown vessels continue their approach." "Admiral," replied Commander Han, "they show no signs of altering course despite our warning broadcasts." Lee frowned. In his 3 centuries serving the Empire, he had overseen the subjugation of 17 species. Each followed a predictable pattern. Initial resistance followed by inevitable surrender. These humans were either exceptionally brave or exceptionally foolish. "Magnify the lead vessel," he ordered. The view screen shifted, showing a closer view of the human ships. They were small, oddly shaped, and lacked the aesthetic uniformity prized by Imperial design. Their hulls appeared to be a patchwork of materials, with visible welding seams and exposed components. "Primitive," Lee muttered. "Barely spaceworthy." The human ships continued their steady approach, seemingly unbothered by the massive Imperial armada arrayed before them. Thousands of Imperial warships waited in perfect formation, their weapons primed and shields at maximum strength. Emperor Kim's orders had been clear: assess the humans' threat level, demand their surrender, and integrate them into the Empire. Standard protocol for all new species. In the 20,000 years of Imperial rule, no species had successfully resisted. "They've entered weapons range," Admiral reported Weapons Officer Sung. Lee nodded. "Send the final warning. Make it clear this is their last opportunity to surrender." Communications Officer Jin's fingers moved across her console. "Broadcasting on all frequencies, sir." Lee stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of Imperial authority. "Attention, human vessels. You have ignored our previous warnings. This is your final opportunity to power down your ships and accept Imperial authority. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. You have 1 standard time unit to respond." The bridge fell silent as they waited. Lee had seen this moment dozens of times before. The quiet before capitulation, when a species finally realized the futility of resistance. "Admiral, we're receiving a response. Audio and visual," Jin announced. "Display," Lee ordered. The main view screen shifted to show the interior of the lead human vessel. Their command center appeared chaotic by Imperial standards, cramped with exposed wiring and screens showing incomprehensible data. At the center stood a human female, her uniform lacking the rigid formality of Imperial dress. But what shocked Lee was her expression. She wasn't afraid. She was smiling. Then, inexplicably, she began to laugh. The sound echoed across the Imperial bridge, causing several officers to exchange confused glances. The human captain continued laughing for several seconds before finally composing herself enough to speak. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping a tear from her eye. "I'm Captain Sun of Earth Exploration Vessel Horizon. I don't mean to be rude, but your threat is just..." She paused, struggling to find words. It's like watching a child threaten an adult with a toy weapon. Lee felt heat rise in his face. In 3 centuries, no one had ever dared speak to him with such disrespect. "You find your imminent destruction amusing?" he asked coldly. "Destruction," Captain Sun replied, her smile never fading. No, you misunderstand. We're not laughing at you specifically. We're laughing at the situation. You see, from our perspective, your ships appear rather outdated." Murmurs spread across the Imperial bridge. Lee silenced them with a sharp gesture. "The Imperial fleet represents the pinnacle of technological achievement in the galaxy," Lee stated firmly. "Your crude vessels are no match for our firepower." Captain Sun nodded thoughtfully. "I understand how it must look from your perspective. Our ships aren't pretty. We build for function, not appearance. But perhaps I should offer a small demonstration." Before Lee could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. "Admiral," shouted Sensor Officer Kang, "we're detecting energy spikes from the human vessels." Raise shields. Prepare to fire. Lee commanded. But nothing happened. The weapons officer pressed his controls repeatedly, confusion spreading across his face. Weapons not responding, sir. Shields offline. Similar reports echoed across the bridge. Propulsion systems failing. Communication arrays going dark. Life support switching to emergency backups. The human captain's face remained on screen, her expression now sympathetic. Don't worry, Admiral. We've only temporarily disabled your offensive systems. Your life support and artificial gravity remain functional. We're explorers, not conquerors. Lee stared at the screen in disbelief. His mighty flagship, pride of the Imperial fleet, had been neutralized without a single shot fired. Around him, his crew looked to him for guidance, but for the first time in his long career, Admiral Lee had no response. Captain Sun's voice was gentle when she spoke again. Perhaps we should start over. I propose a diplomatic meeting rather than threats. We have much to learn from each other. As the reality of the situation sank in, Lee realized that the Empire had made a grave miscalculation. These humans, with their patchwork ships and casual demeanor, had just rewritten the balance of power in the galaxy with a laugh. Admiral Lee gripped the edge of the command console, his knuckles turning white. Around him, the bridge crew of the Imperial flagship worked frantically to restore their systems. Display screens flickered with error messages. The mighty warship, once the pride of the Empire, now drifted helplessly in space. Get me communications back online immediately, Lee snapped. Officer Jin tapped desperately at her unresponsive console. Working on it, Admiral. Something is blocking all our attempts. The main screen still showed the human captain. Unlike Lee's immaculate uniform and rigid posture, Captain Sun wore a simple flight suit. Her hair was pulled back in a practical style, and she leaned casually against her command chair. Is there a translation error? Lee demanded, unwilling to believe what he was hearing. Our language systems must be malfunctioning. The translation officer shook his head. No, sir. The translation matrix is functioning perfectly. She is laughing at us. Captain Sun finally composed herself, though a smile still played at the corners of her mouth. I apologize for my reaction, she said. That was unprofessional of me. But your threat is, well, it's like watching a child threaten an adult with a water pistol. The bridge fell silent. No species had ever dared speak to an Imperial admiral this way. You dare mock the might of the Empire. Lee's voice was dangerously quiet. In his 3 centuries of service, he had ordered the destruction of entire civilizations for lesser insults. Not mocking, Captain Sun replied, raising her hands in a placating gesture. Just amused at the misunderstanding. You see, we humans didn't build our ships to look impressive. We built them for function. She gestured around her simple, utilitarian vessel. The human command center lacked the gleaming metals and precise symmetry of Imperial design. Cables hung exposed from ceilings. Screens displayed data in chaotic arrangements. To Imperial eyes, it looked primitive, almost haphazard. What you see as primitive is actually housing technology you can't comprehend, she continued. While your civilization focused on building bigger ships with more weapons, we focused on understanding the fundamental forces of the universe. Admiral Lee's jaw tightened. This human spoke as if addressing a child. The Empire had ruled the galaxy for 20,000 years. Their technology was the pinnacle of achievement, refined through millennia of conquest and assimilation. Your vessels are tiny, Lee said coldly. Your weapons are not visible. Your shields appear non-existent. Yet you claim superiority. Captain Sun nodded. Size isn't everything, Admiral. Think about your own planet's history. Did the most physically imposing species always survive? Or was it those who adapted, who understood their environment, who developed tools beyond their physical limitations? Lee remained silent. The question was unnervingly perceptive. Humans were never the strongest species on Earth, she continued. We weren't the fastest or the most naturally armed. But here we are, while those other species are extinct or domesticated. Do you know why? Enlighten me, Lee said, his tone icy. Because we understood that true power comes from knowledge, not force. From cooperation, not domination. She leaned forward. Your empire built ships the size of moons to intimidate. We built ships that can manipulate the fabric of reality. The Admiral's expression darkened. Prove your claims. With pleasure, Captain Sun replied with a smile that made Lee deeply uncomfortable. She turned to speak to someone off-screen. Jin, would you please demonstrate the phase shift technology for our Imperial friends? A young human male nodded and pressed several controls on his console. Suddenly, one of the human vessels, previously positioned to the left of their formation, simply vanished. Admiral, shouted the sensor officer, the human ship has disappeared from our scanners. Before Lee could respond, the missing vessel reappeared, inside the Imperial formation, merely 50 meters from the flagship's command tower. Impossible, whispered Lee. No ship could breach Imperial formations without triggering proximity alarms. No known technology could move a vessel that distance instantaneously. Not teleportation, Captain Sun explained, as if reading his thoughts. We simply shifted the ship into a different phase of reality for 3.2 seconds, then returned it to normal space at the coordinates we chose. The implications were staggering. A fleet that could move through space without physically crossing the distance rendered all Imperial defense strategies obsolete. That's just one example, she continued. We've also mastered gravity manipulation, quantum entanglement communication, and energy harvesting from the quantum void itself. Despite his 3 centuries of diplomatic training, Lee found himself speechless. The human ships weren't primitive. They were simply built according to an entirely different technological philosophy. Where the Empire built technology to be seen, humans built technology to be effective, regardless of appearance. I think we need to start our conversation over, Captain Sun suggested gently. Not as conqueror and subject, but as equals with much to learn from each other. Admiral Lee looked around his disabled bridge, at his powerless fleet, and at the small human vessels that had effortlessly neutralized the mightiest armada in the galaxy. For the first time in his long career, he faced a force the Empire could not simply overwhelm. Perhaps, he conceded, we should talk. Admiral Lee's patience had run out. These humans, with their casual manner and outrageous claims, had insulted the Empire for long enough. He turned to his weapons officer with cold determination in his eyes. Fire warning shots across their bow. Show them the might of the Empire. The weapons officer nodded sharply. Yes, Admiral. Targeting systems locked. Firing main energy cannons. The massive Imperial flagship hummed as power surged through its weapon systems. Along the vessel's spine, enormous cannons pivoted into position, their barrels glowing with building energy. Throughout the fleet, thousands of warships prepared to follow their flagship's lead. Fire, Lee ordered. Brilliant beams of concentrated energy erupted from the Imperial weapons, cutting through space toward the human vessels. The bridge crew watched with satisfaction, expecting to see the human ships scramble and panic. This display would remind these upstarts of their place in the galactic order. But something strange happened. As the energy beams approached the human ships, small distortions appeared in space between the vessels. The weapons fire simply vanished into these distortions, like water poured into invisible holes. What happened? Demanded Admiral Lee, leaning forward in disbelief. The weapons officer's fingers flew across his console, checking readings. His face paled. The energy, it's gone, Admiral. Our sensors indicate they created localized gravity wells that absorbed our attack completely. Impossible, Lee whispered. The communication screen activated again, showing Captain Sun's face. She no longer smiled, but her expression remained calm and unthreatened. Perhaps a clearer demonstration is needed, she said. Don't worry, this won't harm anyone. On the main view screen, the Imperial crew watched as a small shuttle detached from the human flagship. It was tiny compared to even the smallest Imperial vessel, barely larger than a maintenance craft. Target that shuttle, Lee ordered. Full weapons barrage. Targeting systems not responding. Admiral, replied the weapons officer, his voice rising with panic. The shuttle approached the Imperial Armada slowly, making no evasive maneuvers. It showed no weapons, no shields, no defensive systems of any kind. Yet it advanced confidently toward the center of the Imperial formation. All ships, open fire on that shuttle, Lee commanded through the fleet-wide communication channel. Silence filled the bridge. No massive energy cannons fired. No torpedo launchers activated. The mighty Imperial Armada, with firepower capable of reducing planets to ash, could not muster a single shot against the tiny human vessel. Then systems began shutting down across the flagship. First weapons, then engines, then shields. One by one, the ship's functions went dark. Emergency lighting activated as main power failed. Through the viewports, Lee could see the same happening across his entire fleet. Thousands of warships powerless and adrift. Captain Sun's voice came through the emergency communication systems. Microscopic machines, she explained. They temporarily disabled your systems. We could have done much worse. But we're explorers, not conquerors. Admiral Lee stood in shocked silence, staring at his dead console. Around him, his crew looked equally stunned. The bridge, normally alive with lights and sounds, was now dim and quiet except for the emergency systems. How? Lee finally managed to ask. How did you deploy these machines? They've been present since our first communication, Captain Sun replied. Carried by light itself through your visual sensors. Once inside your systems, they replicated using materials from your own ships. The implications staggered Lee. Technology that could travel on light beams. Machines small enough to be invisible yet capable of disabling an entire fleet. The Empire had nothing remotely comparable. If you intended conquest, Lee said slowly, you could have destroyed us already. Yes, Captain Sun acknowledged simply. But that's not who we are. A new voice spoke from behind Lee. Fascinating approach to technology. Lee spun around to find a human male standing on his bridge, somehow transported there without anyone noticing. The Imperial guards reached for their weapons, but found them non-functional. I'm Chief Engineer Kang, the human said, nodding respectfully. Sorry for the dramatic entrance. I thought a direct conversation might help us understand each other better. How did you board my vessel? Lee demanded. Kang smiled. Same principle as our microscopic machines, just scaled up for a human-sized object. Phase shifting through quantum dimensional boundaries. He spoke as if explaining something simple to a child. Don't worry, I'm not physically here in the traditional sense. Lee reached out toward the human, his hand passing through Kang's form like smoke. A projection? Lee asked. Not exactly, Kang replied. More like, I've temporarily shifted my physical form to exist partially in your dimension and partially in another. It's perfectly safe. One of the Imperial science officers approached cautiously. Our civilization has theorized about such technology for millennia, but we deemed it impossible. Not impossible, Kang corrected gently, just requiring a different approach to physics than the one your empire pursued. Admiral Lee gazed out at his powerless fleet, the mightiest armada in the galaxy, rendered helpless without a single casualty. In 3 centuries of service, he had never encountered anything like this. The humans didn't just possess superior technology. They operated on principles the Empire had never even considered. What happens now? Lee asked quietly. That depends on you, Captain Sun's voice replied. Our systems will restore your fleet's functionality in exactly 1 hour. No permanent damage has been done. We would like to propose a diplomatic meeting, not as conqueror and subject, but as 2 civilizations with much to learn from each other. For the first time, in 20,000 years of imperial history, an admiral of the fleet found himself considering something other than conquest or withdrawal. I will consult with the Emperor, Lee said finally, Admiral Lee adjusted his formal uniform as he stepped from the Imperial shuttle onto the deck of the human flagship. Despite the vessel's plain exterior, its interior surprised him. The walls gleamed with subtle patterns that seemed to shift as he moved. The air felt fresher than on Imperial ships. The lighting adjusted automatically to mimic natural sunlight. 6 Imperial guards accompanied him, their hands never far from their weapons, yet they appeared unnecessary. No human guards stood watch. No visible security measures blocked their path. Only a young human in a simple uniform waited to guide them. "Captain Sun is waiting in the conference room," the guide said with a polite bow. "Please follow me." Lee walked stiffly, still uncomfortable with this arrangement. Emperor Kim had been furious when informed of the situation. For hours, the Imperial Council had debated their options. In the end, practical reality won out. The humans possessed technology that rendered Imperial military might irrelevant. Diplomacy was the only sensible course. The conference room surprised Lee again. Instead of the expected formal setting with hierarchical seating arrangements common in Imperial negotiations, the humans had created a warm, almost casual space. A round table dominated the center, with comfortable chairs placed at equal distances. Captain Sun rose when they entered. "Admiral Lee, welcome aboard the Horizon. Thank you for coming." Lee nodded curtly. "The Empire is willing to hear your proposals." "Please, sit," she gestured. "Would you like refreshments? We've studied your biology and prepared suitable options." This consideration caught Lee off guard. In Imperial negotiations, comfort was never a priority. Over the next hours, Lee met the human command team. They lacked the formal titles and rigid hierarchy of Imperial officers. They spoke freely, sometimes even disagreeing with their captain openly before reaching consensus. Chief Scientist Kang guided the conversation toward technology. Unlike the Imperial practice of keeping technological knowledge strictly controlled, the humans shared information openly. "Our history shaped our approach to technology," Kang explained, displaying holographic images of Earth's past. "Humans survived not by being the strongest species on our planet, but by being the smartest. We learned to adapt and invent." The images showed primitive humans using simple tools to hunt animals much larger than themselves. Later images displayed increasingly complex technologies, from simple machines to digital computers to quantum systems. "Your technological development occurred remarkably quickly," Lee observed. "Competition drove us," Kang replied. "For most of our history, humans fought each other for resources and territory." Lee nodded. This matched the Imperial understanding of species development. "And then you conquered your whole planet." Captain Sun shook her head. "Not exactly. We nearly destroyed ourselves first." The holographic display showed devastating weapons, cities in ruins, environmental disasters. "We came to a crossroads," she continued. "Continue fighting until we annihilated ourselves, or find a better way." Admiral Lee studied the humans carefully. Their revelation explained much about their approach. "Why not conquer?" he asked bluntly. "With your technology, you could rule the galaxy." The human officers exchanged glances. "We tried conquest among ourselves for centuries," Captain Sun explained. "It never brought happiness or progress. When we unified our planet, we channeled our competitive nature into scientific advancement instead." "Competition without destruction," added Kang. "We raced to create, not to destroy." This concept challenged everything Lee understood about galactic politics. In Imperial doctrine, power meant control over others. The strong ruled the weak. This was the natural order. "You find it difficult to believe," observed Sun, reading his expression. "Let me show you something." Over the following days, the humans shared more than technology. They introduced Lee to their art. Vibrant paintings and sculptures that depicted both beauty and struggle. They played music that ranged from simple melodies to complex symphonies that moved even the stoic admiral. They showed films of human history, philosophy texts from ancient Earth civilizations, and poetry that captured the human experience. Lee found himself increasingly fascinated by these aspects of human culture. Most surprisingly, the humans invited Imperial officers to share their own culture. They listened with genuine interest to Imperial music, studied Imperial art, and asked thoughtful questions about Imperial philosophy. "Your civilization has preserved knowledge for 20,000 years, Captain Sun remarked during one exchange. "That stability is remarkable." "The Empire provides order," Lee replied, feeling a swell of pride. "Without our administration, the galaxy would fall into chaos." "Exactly," Sun nodded. "Your empire provides stability and administrative experience across thousands of worlds. You've developed systems to manage incredible diversity across vast distances." For the first time, Lee felt the humans truly appreciated something about Imperial civilization. "Combined with our technological innovation," Sun continued, "we could transform the galaxy. Not through conquest, but through cooperation." The idea was revolutionary, combining Imperial administrative systems with human technology and innovation. Not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners. That evening, alone in his quarters, Admiral Lee composed his report to Emperor Kim. After 3 centuries of loyal service enforcing Imperial dominance, he found himself advocating for something unprecedented: a true alliance. As he finished writing, Lee realized the humans' greatest strength wasn't their advanced technology at all. It was their adaptability and creative problem-solving, their ability to imagine new possibilities beyond the established order. And perhaps, Lee thought as he sent the transmission, that was exactly what the ancient empire needed most. The space station Unity hung in orbit around a small, uninhabited planet at the exact midpoint between Earth's solar system and the Imperial core worlds. Its design reflected its purpose, neither fully human nor fully Imperial, but something new. The curved, organic lines favored by human architects blended with the precise geometric patterns preferred by the Empire. Today, the main observation deck was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Imperial officials in their formal uniforms stood side by side with human diplomats. Media crews from both civilizations captured every moment of this historic occasion. Emperor Kim entered from one side of the chamber, his ornate robes and crown marking 20,000 years of unbroken imperial tradition. From the opposite door came President Song, wearing the simple but elegant formal dress of Earth's united government. Admiral Lee watched from his position near the Imperial delegation. 1 year ago, he had faced the humans as enemies. Today, he stood witness to a moment that would change galactic history forever. "This doesn't feel real," a familiar voice said beside him. Lee turned to see Captain Sun, now promoted to fleet commander after her handling of first contact. "I never imagined I would see the Emperor sign a treaty as equals," Lee admitted. "In 3 centuries of service, I've witnessed thousands of surrenders, but never a true partnership." Sun smiled. "Sometimes, the universe surprises us." The 2 leaders met at the center of the room. A table made of materials from both Earth and the Imperial homeworld waited there, along with the Galactic Cooperation Treaty, a document that had taken 12 months of careful negotiation. "Today marks the dawn of a new era," Emperor Kim announced, his voice carried through translation devices to every being present. "For 20,000 years, the Empire has brought order to the galaxy through strength. Today, we acknowledge there is another path forward." President Song stepped forward. "Humans ventured into space seeking knowledge and friendship. We found an empire built on different principles than our own. Rather than seeing this as a barrier, we recognize it as an opportunity. Different approaches, when combined with mutual respect, create possibilities neither could achieve alone." The treaty they signed established unprecedented alliances between humans and the Empire. The Empire would continue to provide cultural stability and administrative experience across its thousands of worlds. Humans would share their technological innovations and problem-solving approaches. Most importantly, the treaty ended the practice of forced subjugation, Worlds under Imperial control would gradually gain more autonomy while maintaining the benefits of Imperial infrastructure and protection. After the ceremony, Admiral Lee found himself approached by representatives from species he had once helped conquer. Instead of hatred, he saw cautious hope in their eyes. "Is it true," asked a representative of the Tari, a species conquered 3 centuries earlier, "that we may now develop our own science academies with human assistance?" "It is," Lee confirmed. "The treaty ensures all member worlds have access to educational and technological exchanges." Over the following months, other species in the galaxy, many long oppressed by Imperial might, discovered this new paradigm of interspecies cooperation. What became known as the human approach spread throughout the galaxy, solving problems through innovation rather than force. Imperial worlds that had stagnated under rigid control began to flourish. Human creativity combined with imperial stability created prosperity beyond what either civilization could have achieved alone. 6 months after the treaty signing, Admiral Lee made an unexpected decision. After 3 centuries of military service, he resigned his commission to accept a new position, co-founder of the Joint Academy of Science and Diplomacy. "The future needs fewer admirals and more teachers," he explained to Emperor Kim, who reluctantly accepted his resignation. Captain Sun made a similar choice, leaving her command to join Lee in establishing the academy on the Unity Station. The institution welcomed students from all species, teaching both imperial administrative techniques and human innovative approaches. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you laughed at my threats?" Lee asked Sun one evening as they watched students from 12 different species working together on a quantum physics project. Sun smiled. "Not specifically, but I knew we had to find common ground. Humans learned the hard way that conquest only leads to more conflict. We nearly destroyed ourselves before we understood that cooperation achieves more than domination." "The Empire needed that lesson," Lee admitted. 20,000 years of the same approach. We had stopped growing. As the galaxy entered what historians would later call the Golden Renaissance, the story of first contact became legendary. Children of all species learned about the moment when human laughter confused an Imperial admiral, the precise instant when force gave way to understanding. 5 years after first contact, Unity Station had grown into a thriving center of interspecies cooperation. New technologies developed there helped solve problems that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Art and culture flourished as species freely shared their unique perspectives. Admiral Lee, now Chancellor Lee of the Academy, often told new students the most important lesson from his long life. True strength isn't found in domination, but in the courage to change when confronted with a better way. And somewhere in the Academy archives, a recording remained of that first moment, when Captain Sun laughed at the Imperial threat, not out of disrespect, but because she could already imagine a better future than the one the Empire had planned.